there's a mic. It's on the table.
Hello? Okay. When talking about the idea of a state emergency, it oftentimes means that people are in a state of panic. It oftentimes means that people are in a state where they are unable to make rational decisions, and at that point in time, we see that media just makes this worse in the end of the day. That's the case coming from side of government, right? What does banning media freedom mean? It means that we would completely stop the existence, and we would completely ban the freedom of media during these crises. That is to say, during economic crises, during terrorism, during epidemics. It means that be it conventional media, be it your social media, be it any form of media whatsoever, we would not allow it to have the freedom in the end of the day. And just on the account of the model, right? We say that the people and the outside the house will know about these crises in the first place. That is to say, the sort of mechanisms that exist and the outside the house is when state makes a public announcement about this crisis. As you say, they will go up, they will tell that, oh, the Wuhan virus is going on, and that oh, there's an economic crisis that's currently going on in today's world. But I think in these particular instances, we even open up an inquiry, that's to say, when people can ask towards states like about the crisis that is going on. I think information towards these individuals on the grounds should not be a problem under our side of the house. And just another thing to note, I think that when it comes to informing these individuals, it's important that we give them the right information, and an information that will help state in the end of the day, because state has an obligation or the incentive to want to help the people, considering that these are the individuals who have voted them into power in the first place, right? So where does government stand in this debate? We believe that there's a principle when it comes to banning. There's a principle justification when it comes to banning this media in the first place, and there are practical outcomes that we can garner from it anyway. Before I move on, are there any clarifications? No? Okay. So let's talk about why is it justified we ban this media in the first place, right? This is a preemptive if they want to argue about the right to democracy, because they're going to talk about how media oftentimes means that it's a right for people to gain information, and thus is a right of and thus is in the principle of democracy in the first place. We say under our side of the house, at the moment in which democracy becomes harmful towards you, and at the moment in which democracy is an unbalanced democracy, that's the point in which this democracy should not exist. What does this mean, right? Firstly, considering the conditions that exist within state during these crises means that more oftentimes than not, your people are in a state of panic, right? It means that when individuals on the ground start to think irrationally because they feel like they're in a state of emergency, they feel like they're in a state of urgency in the first place, right? Because they feel like they need to save themselves, they feel like there's a big problem going on. This is where media comes into play. The capitalistic incentive that media have when it comes to portraying the idea or portraying the news towards people in the first place. That's to say that media has an incentive to want to over-exaggerate or more oftentimes create news that is not even true in some instances to buy it, for people to actually buy into these narratives in the first place, because that is what sells to people. The idea that there will be a way to solve this when it's going to take much more time in these particular instances. I think that people will now start to overreact. People will start to do things that are unnecessary towards solving this problem in the first place. Things like rioting, things like the beheading of people when your terrorist shows you a video, when a terrorist shows you the video of like how to defend Islam. I think in these particular instances, you more oftentimes create an overreaction and over-exaggeration as to what people want to do in the first place. Before I move on.
In instances of a terrorist attack, we should disclose full information that there's a potential bombing happening at a certain area, for example.
Yeah, I think we're fine with that because I think it also means that people will be ready for the bombing. It means that people can move out at any point in time. I think that just based on the model I've given you, I don't think that will be a problem. I don't think there will be a problem that will exist, right? So with the nature and the characterization of media being uncontrollable in the first place, it means that more often times than not, the panic and the overreaction happens are unnecessary. And the practical implication of this towards the state as it is, firstly, we have to note that the state is already in a state of emergency. It's even worse when these people start doing all these unnecessary things because it means that now state has to deal with them. This means that you're going to stop and you're going to stop the progression of state during the economic crisis. That is to say, when the epidemic broke out, you are unable to put resources into actually researching towards that certain epidemic. When you are putting resources into stopping riots, for example, or when you're putting resources into stopping certain individuals who don't actually who are unnecessarily being violent towards people, right? So when you go, yeah, and state obviously has the obligation to want to stop this emergency in the first place. Where like when the comparative is under our side of the house, without the over exaggeration of media that happens under their side of the house, in these particular instances, that is when state can make a clear decision. That is when state is able to control the people on the ground. When you don't give all this over exaggerating information towards these individuals are now more likely going to be in a calm state because they feel like state has been holding their hand and will continue to help out in these particular emergencies in the first place. Given the model, I don't think it'll be a problem anyway. So the value of this argument stems in the fact that these states are in a state of emergency, means that we need to give as much leeway and we need to give as much pathway as to them to actually solve it in the first place, because it means that a lot of people are going to suffer in the future. It means that if you keep on putting this, if you keep on having these people in a panic state, you're going to make the suffering even worse, and a lot of people, and you're going to hinder the state's progress in actually helping these individuals in the end of the day. I think that in a world where people get misinformation, even if it means democracy, I think that is a world where you don't, where you harm the people even more, where you unjustifiably give people false information. Thank you.
For the speech, I'd like to invite the leader of opposition.
Hello.
I know. Sit on purpose.
The reason why most of the COVID-19 quarantines are very worried at the first place, we tell you, is when nations, for example China, who downplay the whole entire true story, right? I think this means, even if there is a disclosure on how side government wants to propose to you, we tell you these are disclosures that were most likely going to be downplayed, and I think it's something that's very harmful at the first place. What's the problem, right? Recognize that national emergency is the time where you tell you media plays an important role, right? I think we need to characterize this media also, right? I think media, it means like social media or even like news outlet at the first place, and I think this is a very important platform for individuals to actually voice out. And we're going to tell you that it's very harmful to the international community as well. So what's the stance coming out from side opposition is simple. We prefer a world where times of national emergency totally fine with operating through media. No matter social media or even a news outlet, we're completely fine allowing them to voice out and state their opinions. And then I think this means also disclose to government information, right? Recognize the fact that most government downplay their whole entire information. It's not about helping the citizens or even the international community. It's about uplifting their own reputation and on their own measures at the first place. But we tell you, we're going to start off with rebuttals and answering a very important question on why government, on how toxic is it when government takes away, when government censors every single message, right? The first, on how side Prime Minister tried to tell you that when you provide, that that you're more likely going to disclose information, right? I don't think this is true, right? You're more likely going to downplay the whole entire fact, and even maybe you're going to tell lies. Or being downplayed also means we tell, for example, how the coronavirus issue, you're more likely going to tell individuals and the state to stay at home, instead of telling them like how many deaths are there, you must be watched out in the first place. But I think this relates to the second point on how the Prime Minister wanted to tell you about the irrationality state of these individuals, right? Recognize the fact that they are irrational and create riots in the first place is not because they know about misinformation, right? I think it's lesser information known. They are panicked because they don't have the idea of the information being held at the first place. I think all of these things slow down your progression of the country, and it's something is really harmful. Before I move on to my substantive, yes.
Your media in your work means that a lot of people right now in Singapore are literally panic buying in a lot of local supermarkets. Tell me, why is that the better alternative?
Okay, I got an answer to you on the idea. Even if it's a miss, why would more likely fake news won't happen, right? I got an answer to you through this argument. The first, why fake news more likely going to happen, right? Understand, in times of national emergency, there's no point of you going to send fake news as well. But I think this means that people are skeptical on what they post, on what people post, right? They are rational instead, right? We got to prove to you that how they are rational. But I think also things like, for example, in social media, we tell how Instagram has this blue tick to prove that it's someone influential. I think these are news that they can be taken by all these people. And recognize, right, even if there's a video of a virus suddenly, right, it won't be that fake, right? Because I recognize, we tell in the world today, we tell when people are rational, where social media even have algorithms for check and balances, there's always 2 points to a certain fact. And I think it's something that they need to recognize under the side of government. But also, recognize on how you actually lose important opportunity, right? Things, for example, when there's a whistleblower from China, from this doctor who just passed away, we tell you how citizens are raged at the point. We tell you when nations, for example, China, blocked the whole entire story of what could have been, right? What does this mean? It means that you loosen 3 months that can actually build on for research and development. It means you loosen 3 months for people to take extra mechanism, or maybe even 3 months for your mass production to actually increase, which we are very lack of, right? What does this mean, right? It means you're harming individuals in a way that you harm their reputation. And I think it's something that is horrible in the first place, when you're able to actually mitigate the disease, but just because of your own government who operates by their own reputation, you harm individuals at the first place. But thirdly, also about how the importance of the freedom of speech, right? The ability to communicate through media is something that's important, right? Recognize that individuals in Wuhan now, they are very irrational, they're very panic as heck, they totally agree to the fact. It's very important when they can actually communicate with their own parents by 2 things. The first is about explaining their own circumstance, getting supporting structures, which can only happen on our side. We tell when you don't block media at the first place, we tell this is a voice out platform for them to actually convey also messages on how the status going right. Things for example like this are very important. We tell you how we totally regret the fact how China captured 2 BBC reporters and don't allow them to escape the borders of China is something that is very toxic. But also recognize from side opposition, we're still completely fine having geographical borders, but we're not fine in the fact we tell you when you block social media or you block media as a whole. I think all of these support structures comes by talking to your parents, recognizing these facts. When they tell you like citizens in Wuhan at the first place can't even go and celebrate Chinese New Year, can't even reunion their family. All of these support structures are something that's really important also. But also fourthly is on how you create pressure towards researchers, right? Recognizing the fact that when social media leads hashtag movements, right? All of these things means pressuring towards target a certain group of individuals to do something. The ability to actually pressure these researchers is something that is really important and comes out in a larger scale from side opposition. We recognize with that things, for example, when the Me Too movement, when you pressure men to actually admit their sexual harassment. I think all of these things you relate it to the coronavirus. It's very important when you pressure like World Health Organization to do so, and something that's strong from our side. Fourthly, is about the ability to understand, right? Recognize that most international communities is also important for them to actually understand what are the problems, right? Recognize you totally neglect the fact. We tell the really reason you're panic at the first place, we tell you is when you don't have the ability to understand the problem. This makes you really panic as you don't know how the virus looks like. especially in the bigger state, we recognize the whole entire time frame of how the coronavirus works. We tell you it's only, I think around now then only individuals understand the symptoms of it, right? We tell you where we could have done 3 months earlier to take better preparations, right? And this also means, for example, your Sri Lanka bombing case. We tell you it's very harmful when you don't disclose the bombing location to your citizens. We will harm a lot of them at the first place just because I don't understand why international recognition is so important. And also the idea of riots, what they want to tell you, I think we already clearly explained on how, because of their panic state, I think giving them the information at least makes them calm down and it's such better. But I think also fifthly, it's about the idea of sympathy, right? Recognize that most individuals, we tell you when they are forced to disclose and they are only relying on social media, it's really important as media performs a platform where all supporters from the world at least give them some motives, right? All these motives makes them at least they are not alone, and it's something that is important, right? Recognize if you don't want a world where nations, for example China, function based on their reputation and not even on their civilians, go with side opposition.
Thank you for the speech. They invite the member of God.
Ladies and gentlemen, panel, I think throughout this side debate that we've heard, I think side of opposition never really wanted to deal with the real characterization of what happens in the national crisis. That is to say the Wuhan virus and the coronavirus outbreak that is happening right now. With the advent of social media, we would argue from side of government it is actually making things worse. Things like panic buying that's currently happening in a lot of local markets in Singapore, things like literally the mass production, which we think is actually a waste to begin with. We would argue on the side of government that the unnecessary things that translate from the irrationality of individuals is not more harmful in these circumstances. I have a few points of refutation to the speaker before me. The first, this is something that we thought we haven't even brought up to begin with. Is it fake news? I think some government never really wanted to propagate the idea of is it fake news to begin with, because we could see that in a lot of circumstances these days, society is able to pinpoint or able to fact check certain things whether or not it's true. Therefore, fake news is not part of the debate to begin with. But even if the government is arguing about fake news, we think it's going to be more likely. That is to say, over-exaggerating certain information is in fact the incentive of certain media companies to do it. Then why is over-exaggerating translates to fake news then? We would argue in some unique instances, over-exaggerating leads to fake news is because of how people interpret certain news to begin with. That leads to fake news. Why is this the case? Because oftentimes in a panic as well as a crisis situation, individuals aren't able to rationalize things properly. And the kind of headlines you get throughout the media company is more likely going to clickbait you to click on that particular website to begin with. What does this lead to? This leads to headlines such as the amount of deaths is increasing, therefore a lot of people are going to panic and things like that. But what's the comparative we brought to? We do want to give information to individuals, but we would say it comes to state announcement. Why is this the case then? Because oftentimes state announcement isn't necessarily exaggerated. Because oftentimes media freedom that they want to protect is something that state cannot control. So therefore, we will wipe this slate clean and would argue that it's better for state to give out information in those circumstances anyway. But secondly, do they get pressure to doctors or researchers to actually rampant the production? A, this is an assumption, because literally when you're talking about state in a national crisis and they have literally banned media, I think it's also within the natural incentive for state to pressure your doctors or to pressure certain hospitals to come up with certain vaccines anyway. This assumes that state is down on this side of the house, which we wouldn't think would happen anyways. But third is with regards to the discussions that they want to talk about, whether or not it's information exclusive or the kind of supporting structures you have, we think they were also very neglectful when it comes to dealing with our work to begin with. Why is this the case? Because we would argue in some government, there will be certain discussions that's happening. Because literally, when state comes out with an announcement and bans media, that is to say that there's an outbreak, that is to say terrorism is happening, I think it also means that a lot of your families, a lot of your local imams in your area, why don't you talk about this, on how to prevent and things like that. But what's the comparative over here? The comparative over here is that we don't have media constantly on your neck telling you that this is an issue that you should be wary of. We think that the kind of unnecessary panic that breeds out of this is something that we don't want. Therefore, we would argue that discussions is something that will happen anyway. But before I move on to my argument, is there any point of refutation? Thank you. Argument. Why is it then we believe that media freedom necessarily instigates as well as gives ammunition to individuals to be anti-state, and why it's bad for the alleviation of the problem, especially when it comes to giving ammunition to opposition parties to leverage off? The first, I think it's extremely important to know the way in which people view a national emergency in the lens of social media. Oftentimes, you would argue it looks like clickbait headlines to appeal to people. That is to say, it means that we would say, in some extent, media companies have a way to make it seem as if it's interesting, to make it seem as if it's viable to begin with. Why is this the case? Because when you open up a click in the website, when you open up a certain click which leads to the article, it means that there's advertisements in each and every pages. Therefore, we would argue it's within the incentive of the same media companies to increase their money, to increase their revenue by having these interesting or very over-exaggerated headlines to begin with. But then that begs the argument, do you have fact check? We would argue, yes, you have fact check. We would argue in these circumstances, the unnecessary media headlines that you have would cause certain things like inducing panic with individuals, which was literally the argument in my PM's speech. Now, why is this bad? This leads to things like panic buying. This leads to individuals literally panicking and being angry towards state, right? But why then do we think it instigates ammunition of hatred towards state? The first, media freedom oftentimes translates to the ability of opposition parties to leverage off of that issue. What do we mean by this? We would argue this national emergency absence with the existence of social media gives the power to opposition parties to leverage off of this. Why is this the case that they will leverage off of this and how, right? Two things. The first, because they want to win the future elections. Secondly, I think the way in which they would more likely leverage off of this is to vilify state. That is to say that, that the current ruling party isn't doing their job and therefore they are bad. Therefore, it's a lot easier for people to actually nitpick and look at state, that state is not doing their job. It's a lot easier for now opposition parties to vilify state or to hate state. This is where it leads to my first biggest argument when it comes to rioting to begin with. And it's a lot easier for these opposition parties to coalesce support, galvanize support when it comes to actually having people to go against state to begin with. Now, why does this mean that it's a lot easier for opposition parties to coalesce and galvanize support, become anti-state to begin with? Ladies and gentlemen, in a national crisis, it's a lot easy for people to become panicked. It's a lot easy for people to think that state is not doing their job, or the reality is opposite of that. Literally, you would argue that there might be some terrorist organizations right now, but it does not necessarily mean that the ruling party is not doing anything. What happens in a situation where there's media freedom? Who would argue that these are the same individuals or the same individuals from the opposition party to radicalize and use this at their advantage, because oftentimes the language that is being used oftentimes is being instilled with anger, being instilled with hatred towards state. Let's say that state isn't doing their job. Now, why is it then bad? Twofold. The first, social instability. So the kind of discussions, at best, what they get is oftentimes manipulated by the opposition parties because they are the most loudest, they have the most language, they have the most influence over people in that particular circumstance. It's a lot easier for individuals to blame state at a point at which it is a point of national emergency. But secondly, the reason why it's bad, this is because individuals are now focusing on it being a woeful partisan issue. The reason why we think this is harmful, because now it becomes a social thing for individuals to argue upon. That is to say, the assumption of individuals that state is not doing their job. And the reason why we think this is harmful also is because oftentimes individuals will now forego any policy that state does because it's a lot easier for us to blame state at the point in which state has done something wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, you give opposition parties more ammunition when it comes to being anti-state, and being anti-state isn't any better to help us solve this ever-growing problem. Exceptionally proud to propose.
Thank you for the speech. I would like to invite the member of all.
Doesn't matter also.
Tak start pun.
The characterization brought up to you from the side of opposite government, when they told you that the government will disclose full information to the general public, I think it's a false pretense to begin with. The very reason they told you panic is something that's inherently wrong and bad to begin with is because panic causes individuals to be irrational, causes individuals to start things like riots, to leave their house and disobey the orders of the government. This is the very reason it's impossible for the government to want to have full disclosure of the current national crises currently happening. We tell you what does it actually look like. It looks like state messages telling you to stay at home and just be safe. These are the kinds of messages that not to leave your house. These are the very vague instances in which a government ensures your safety but also doesn't want you to panic. This is how the messages are going to look like. We don't think a government is going to tell you there's a suspected terrorist attack and there's a potential bombing in your area, because this is what sparks the very panic they wanted to prevent in the first place. Before I move on to my arguments, I have a few rebuttals that don't fit into my arguments. First, on the idea of how you blame the state and that you have ammunition against the opposition party. I don't think this is very relevant in the debate if it's true that this is a government that couldn't fulfill its duties for national security and opposition parties have the ability to now use it in future elections. I don't think that's the crux of the debate. I think as long the debate should center around whether the citizens are better able to be safe during circumstances like this, whether they're better able to adapt to these situations, that is the most important thing. I do not think the idea of a political disparity is something that should be taken into account into this debate. And now I'll move on to my first argument on the public's reaction towards the epidemic. So firstly, the riots and the public outcry, the disruption that side opposition, government talk to you about are things that stem from panic. These are things that they already characterized to you. But this is panic that originates from the lack of information. These are individuals that want to know what are the things that are happening in their country that are directly going to affect them, whether or not they are safe within their own homes, whether their city is under attack. These are the things that they are unsure of, and you cannot disclose because you want to keep public order and you do not want to have disruption in a public setting in the first place. So the lack of information is what creates this kind of panic. The riots that you have is to pressure the government to tell you the circumstances that the country is currently facing. The people on the ground want to know what is directly happening in the country, and this information you hide from them. You hide from them in the first place in order to stop the panic.
Muslim people around the world are being discriminated because of the exaggeration that media has upon them being terrorists. How do you negate this in your world?
You allow the exaggeration of this kind of media because you allow skepticism and conspiracy theories to exist when you limit the ability for the media to exist in the first place. When you don't allow a dominant narrative to be prevalent in society. Because now it's every individual that has no access to these kinds of information. This is information that they're going to theorize on their own. You're going to have a lot of different scenarios that are happening. It's hard when you don't have a centralized issue that individuals are better able to understand. So how is this better mitigated on the side of opposition? We tell you the side of opposition, when you have media outlets, when there are individuals on the ground that are facing the current things that are happening, when there's a current terrorist attack, for example, happening in this sector of the country or this city, these are things that are better able to be disclosed to the general public. So there's now less of a reason to, or they are panicked, but these are individuals that are scared. So they are less likely to run out into the streets, for example, and riot knowing that there's a terrorist attack, because individuals are better able to report on instances of these kinds of attacks, for example. You're also able to protect these individuals from potentially putting themselves in dangerous positions. So when individuals report bombings in area A, individuals know not to go to area A to avoid the potential being harmed in the first place. These are instances that can only exist when you have media freedom, because the government never operates, not all instances, operates in the best interest of the citizens. We tell you that how the Wuhan virus, something that was already discovered by a doctor in China in December, the Chinese Communist Party told him to silence, not to disclose, not to exaggerate the harms of this virus. The very reason this happened is why the outbreak could have had 3 months of potential research to mitigate the harms, but we never had it because there was no ability for the media to disclose this information to the rest of the international community. These are the kinds of discourse and potential research in order to prevent problems that you do not have on the side of government, when you limit all the media interaction to only the government, when the government prioritizes winning the next election, so they need to seem like the most the best party, so they try to take things into their. They try to solve the problem on their own without needing to rely on international support to seem like a competent country, to maintain its reputation and being able to solve the national crisis. These are the instances that you have on side government. No, I'll take one later. Thirdly, on how you create, secondly, on how you create urgency to the issue. We tell you, oftentimes the general average individual isn't going, when they are given the access to media, aren't going to just start spreading false rumors or spreading really absurd theories. It's like individuals that want to have the public or the people around them know the current situation they're going through, know the current epidemic, the severity of the problem. So when people in the Hubei province, in Wuhan, they are given the ability to talk about how they are on lockdown, the emotions that they feel, how scared they are every single day due to this epidemic, the rice shortages because the borders are closed, because individuals are unable to go in or out of the country. These are things that they are better able to describe and disclose to everyone in the international community to create that sort of urgency to the issue. When you try to downplay the harms, when you try to limit the amount of panic, is when the point in which these epidemics that break out is a lot harder to control and contain. We tell you that because you have this sort of urgency, you have things like people in war-torn countries, victims that are trying to escape the borders to go to a safer area. These are individuals that now have the opportunity to film, put on their Instagram stories or their Facebook stories, the people around them, allow them to see the everyday struggles of them, the immense amount of fear, having to constantly have paranoia when you're sleeping on the ground in your country, because any moment an IS militant will come and shoot you up. This is the kind of sympathy that we're able to garner because you're able to propagate it in an international area, a very widespread thing that a lot of people use. Social media is something that's very integrated in our society today, something that everybody has access to. And because of these kinds of epidemics and issues, these are things that tend to go viral. These are things that are able to garner the international pressure and the urgency to solve the issues and the sympathy in order to sympathize with the victims in the first place. Very proud to oppose.
You've had a speech, and the invite you to close our please.
Yes. Under SIDC government, we tell you that in times of national crisis, media is controlled and influenced by something we call desperation. We tell you, and the effect it has on a person desperation is so destructive that through media and the discussions you have there, the radical discussions that you have on media, that it harms not just the individual, but the society and the community that you have. The community on the side of opposition will crumble to pieces at the point where we have these radical discussions that happen through media at the end of the day. This segregation of certain groups and parties through media means that people are left out and people are dying. I'm going to do about 4 things in speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about a few rebuttals coming from side of opposition, the principle of this debate, the practical outcomes that we get, and the overall best case and worst case scenario of both worlds and why we win on that. But before that, first I'd just like to give a count what this world looks like. Let's say the world that we support is a world where information is displayed as such. Let's say on side government, we'll have like state announcement as an assembly through things like school, and you have your corporations doing drills, for example. Let's say your state says, hey, there's a virus, you need to stay calm, here, wear this mask. We tell you only in the areas that there are affected people. Let's say when side of opposition wanted to give a POI about the terrorist bombing attacks, we would clear this area. Of course, we're not going to let these people in these areas die. It's just the fact that we don't tell the people in other areas to panic, because that will raise riots and discrimination towards the people affected. On the side of opposition, just realize the types of discussion that you have here is that, guys, we're all going to die. Let's say on Twitter, you're going to see people saying like, oh, from first it's World War III, now it's World War Z because of the coronavirus outbreak. We think it's because of these harmful discussions that you don't that you segregate society, and the narratives that you propose is harmful. We agree that in some instances it means less no thank you, less information is able to be spread in society, but we say that certain types of information is especially harmful towards people. Before I move on to my principal arguments,
Recognize your state announcement is not going to give out all the information due to their own reputation. Then how is it useful?
okay, firstly, it's not about their reputation that we don't disclose certain types of information. It's the fact if we tell people that this disease will kill you in the next 14 days, or the terrorists will go to your place and kill you immediately. It's the fact that you instill panic among people, you instill discrimination, you instill hatred towards a certain party or a certain race. Let's say you discriminate against, you start to skepticize about Muslim people being terrorists, and the narratives that currently exist in society means that you will have more discrimination, you have more panic in these instances, which leads to less rational decisions, such as my Deputy Prime Minister already pointed out, happens because of the desperation that happens in society because of the national crisis, where people are suffering, people are hungry, and people want to continue living. Moving on to the principle of this debate. State obligation to ban media and to keep it on control versus the freedom of speech that I want to talk about this side. Realize that the previous 2 opposition speakers have not contended any of the points coming from our principle. Let's say it's the state's obligation to ban the media. Realize that my first speaker already told you and explained to you why exactly it's because these people were voted into power, these people have the resources available, and these people are the only people that can control the people on the ground. It's because of these reasons they don't want you to have riots on the lower ranks. Let's say because riots cause bloodshed, it's so harmful. A big part of opposition was that they agreed that rioting was banned because of bloodshed. They told you in 2 reasons that rioting will happen. Firstly, because of the lack of information. We tell you that, especially in the desert house, information is what's caused rioting. Let's say if you know you have a deadly disease, you're going to have riots. Let's say if you know that Tun Mahathir was restricting, they didn't want to restrict Chinese people coming to Malaysia for the first 3 weeks, but now it's okay lah. But in these instances, you instill hate upon state that my second speaker wanted to talk to you about. I'm going to move on to that, the practicals, after this. But realize that skepticism in these instances just leads to a slippery slope into more racial discrimination that you get in the outcome that we don't want at the end of the day. They try to talk to you about something about parents being a support structure that we just don't buy, because at the point where you have phones, you can write letters, you can talk to them personally, that's not being banned under our side house. What we're banning is just the conventional social, your newspapers. We say that in these instances is the point where you don't get that information, this radical and harmful information under our side of the house. Moving on to practical outcomes.
opposition and then chance at state hatred. This is what happens on the side of opposition. You invoke hatred into people when opposition said that state isn't functioning, with the example of Tun Mahathir I gave just now, because now people have a reason to hate state. They have a reason to go against anything that state says. You tell people that the only way that you are able to get out of this national crisis is through violence. That's the type of outcome that happens on the side of opposition. This is harmful because the amount of people that die, the amount of people that do radical things that aren't proportionate to what should happen, we say it's too big. That's why you waste resources, you waste money on buying things that aren't unnecessary. Let's say in Singapore, for example, my deputy prime minister has told you about how people are spending too much money on supplies that won't actually affect them in the long run. Let's say this coronavirus outbreak is being controlled by state. Let's say you have checks at airports, you limit the amount of flights that are coming from Wuhan. Social instability. Let's say, okay, social instability. The blame on a person through discrimination and radicalization. I've already covered this enough. Let's move on to worst case and best case scenarios. The worst case coming from side of government. Let's say a world where we agree that some people, we agree that sometimes it's hard for us to display certain types of information, and people will still panic through the types of discussions on the lower rates. We tell you it's still beneficial under our side of the day because state has fulfilled their moral obligation to do things, to fulfill the moral obligation that they needed to do in the first place. The best case under their side of the house is a world where somehow enlightened society where everybody can work collectively in a world where people don't discriminate against each other. We say is highly unlikely, but let's just give them a shot, right? Let's say this world is possible. We tell you in these instances, the information, the panic that you get from people is so bad that you leave out, even if the majority of people are being benefited, let's say your white majority or Malay majority is being benefited, you leave out the people that have been discriminated against for the past thousands of years. We tell you this is especially harmful coming from their side of the house. Back to proposal.
The speech, I'd like to invite the way from up to close out of case.
Government's alternative that they use without using this media is that they just give announcements to these certain individuals. I'm going to tell you why these announcements isn't something that is good and why is it something that is very vague, right? So these announcements is most likely not clear because it doesn't give these people enough information. So you're most likely not to comply because you don't know the reason of your actions. Because under our side of the house, at least you know the reasons why these type of things are happening. And under the side of government, you can't tell these individuals the actual problems because then the harms that they told that will happen under our side would happen under their side as well. So this is when you can't take whatever benefits that they have told you into something that is big. So understand that under your side, you don't supply enough information to the individual. What do I mean by this? For example, you only tell people to stay at home, or you tell people to wear their mask without even telling them what type of disease they can get. And this because you don't tell them the reasoning for those actions. At least under our side, you give this information through media. Okay, and also I'm gonna argue on this type of this fake news, right, which is something that became a minor issue in this debate. So. The DPMF came out here and spent most of his time with his speech talking about how this fake news happens, and it happens through over-exaggeration. So I don't understand how this over-exaggeration works. And if you say it's over-exaggeration, it's just putting a post that tells the truth and then people commenting so big about it. And I don't think that is fake news. Fake news under both sides of the house, because I don't see how that works, right? So we take it at your best case and assume that it is actually fake news. So why fake news isn't likely to spread? Every time when an official news channel posts or shares something, it always has a verification, as it was said by my leader of opposition earlier. So if it isn't a verified post or something, this is when you have people that can sue. Who sue this type of companies for actually this type of news channels for posting this type of things. So, and also, if you actually see rumors that you may think it's false or true, if you also see many news channels putting up the same thing, and most of them are also verified, that's when you will know that this certain post is something that is legitimate. What is something that's very important that side of government never actually rebutted to my two speakers before me on about the freedom of people to media. So this is when under your side of the house, you can't communicate with other people in an easier way. My leader of opposition has already told you all the harms that happened here, and none of these speakers from that side actually gave you an actual rebuttal towards this. Recognize that the information that you get from social media is very important. You will have the sense of uncertainty because you don't know what is going on in the actual life of your own country as well. So this is when this is most likely when you as a person would actually riot, because you yourself don't know what is going on in your country. And moving on to my next issue on more about when will your people get angry. So under the side of government, you say that these people protest after receiving news that panics others. So I don't understand why would you protest after knowing the truth of what's happening in your country. If your country says that they are trying their best to actually solve the problem, I don't think protesting, the people on the ground protesting is actually going to help, because there's nothing that the government can do if they don't know how to solve that certain problem, right? So they have to prove to that to us. They haven't proved to that to us. At least under our side, you actually tell people about the country's problems so that people will actually understand. My leader of opposition has already pointed out that when you lie to the people on the ground, that's when you wouldn't side with the government, because you don't tell them the truth. So I don't understand how on their side you have more people, how on our side you have more people protesting compared to their side. And also earlier on how one of the speakers under their side we're talking about how people will tend to blame the state for all the problems that they are facing. First of all, sometimes it really is that certain countries' fault for not taking care of that situation. Okay, maybe we concede that these things sometimes cannot be blamed on the government, but side of government has told you that it all gets better when you ban people from social media. It doesn't make sense, because when you are making people on the ground get even more, you're making people on the ground get even more angry at the government. And I don't think this is a very good alternative, because people are already doubting the progress of your government, and you're just stripping away these people's rights through social media. And understand that this social media is very important. It destroys a lot of these people's communication with others, because this social media is actually used to actually communicate with your family members. And so not only that you ban that social media so that these people don't get panicked by it, but you also ban it for the benefits of themselves. And they haven't told us why that is something that is justified and is something that is good under their side. So what is the first issue that we have beaten you today? So the first one is how we have proved to you why news in social media are actually better than these announcements, because the announcements that are very vague, and people who don't comply to these announcements because of the reasoning that they have to do it. And also why that person should have that freedom to media under our side of the house, because media is something that is very important, and whether or not which side of the house would actually have more riots. And I think that is a side of government which would constantly make other people protest on the government, because you constantly lie to them until you resolve that issue, and you wouldn't even know how long is that time period for you to resolve that issue, and whether or not you have these type of fake news that comes from this over exaggeration. So on these four issues, I believe that side of opposition has taken this view.
Thank you for the speech. I'll reply.
There are two main metrics to judge the debate. Firstly, on the idea of the public's reaction towards, in both worlds, whether media is allowed to be used in both worlds, in side of opposition. And secondly, on the idea of public safety, and which side better helps individuals on the ground, the citizens that the government has a duty to protect. So then, number one, the idea of public reaction. We told you it's hard for individuals to want to comply to the request of the government in order to want to stay in their houses, for example, to wear protective, to wear special masks, for example, to prevent the contraction of the coronavirus in the first place, when you never give them a reason to want to comply. When these are individuals that lack the information and do not see the urgency needing to comply with the government's request. We tell the alternative that's provided on the side of opposition is that maybe we have exaggerated news, but this is news that has some truth to it. So maybe the news says there's 10 terrorist bombings, but the truth is there is 1 terrorist bombing. This is still some sort of truth that we get out to the general public, and the public knows that there's an outcry or an epidemic that's currently happening. Then these are the individuals that are unlikely to want to riot. Because even if these are individuals that are panicked, if you know there's a extremely contagious virus an extremely contagious virus currently in your country, or that there's a potential bombing in your area, these are individuals that are likely going to comply with the request of the government, because the government has transparency and people trust the government because the government is forced to provide the real news because the media outlets need to be corrected in order to prevent public outcry in the first place. This is the reaction that the public will likely have on the side of opposition, because these are individuals that are going to want to comply, want to stay at home, want to protect themselves, and are unlikely to riot because they have a reason to comply with the government. On the side of government, when you do not disclose this information, when you tell them that you just have to do it because that is what the government needs you to do, this is when the riots are likely to happen. When there's a lack of understanding of information, when individuals want to know, especially when it concerns your personal well-being, these are things these individuals deserve to know, and you restrict from them. These are the reasons you will have your riots. Your riots are a gateway for these individuals to earn that information, but it's riots that don't need to exist on the side of opposition when you disclose this information a lot better on a scale, or at least we have some sort of information disclosed to these individuals. And secondly, on the idea of public safety, tying into the first issue too, if these are individuals that are more likely to comply with the government's request, because the government is likely able to be more trusted, when the government is being able to be more transparent, when they have to reveal information to counter the supposed over-exaggeration that exists in media, this means that when the government discloses information, this is the most verified source. You can't dispute it, it's from the very government that governs your country. This is the information you can truly trust that can only exist when governments are forced to provide counter narratives, when the government has to correct the current issues that are being told. This is when you have better public safety and individuals are likely to comply. I'm very proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech. I want to invite Prof. reply.
Ladies and gentlemen, panel, the Sinjar massacre, which is a genocidal killing and abduction of thousands of Yazidi men, the Sinjar city by ISIS in August 2014. They destroyed a lot of Shiite Zainab shrines, executed resistors, and demanded the residents to swear allegiance or be killed. These are the languages that oftentimes your regular media companies will do. What is the alternative that government proposes? Yes, you report on certain terrorist issues, but the kind of language that you use impacts individuals. And this is what differs from some government and some opposition to this debate. Because realize that all of the benefits that they wanted to accrue on that side of the house was very circumstantial, because it was based on the interpretation of the individuals when it comes to seeing that over-exaggerated headline to begin with. We conceded that at some point, maybe we lose out on certain communications, maybe we lose out on social media interactions on our side of the house. We would argue that it's sufficient for things like word of mouth, things like phone calls can still exist on our side of the house as a medium for individuals to interact to begin with. We would argue, back in the days when the Spanish flu was actually a pandemic, a lot of people knew because of word of mouth. A lot of people knew because they had friends with hospital officials. So I think it was rather convenient for them to assume that a lot of people wouldn't know. The debate then becomes, which information is, to what extent should information be given to people? Because all of the case that came from that side of the house was based on the presumption that our information was not enough. We would argue in these circumstances, the amount of information that exists on this side of the house is too much for the people to handle. Why is this the case? Because oftentimes during your 7 p.m., which is more likely going to be a lot of people watching the news, there will be a lot of news and reporters on that particular issue, on the national emergency. For example, these media companies focusing on the Wuhan virus, focusing on certain terrorist ideals. What does this mean then? This means that those ideologies or those news are put on the neck of the individuals to constantly remind them and to constantly make them feel insecure of their environment, constantly make them feel anxious. And this is not, they didn't even respond to my argument when it comes to how opposition parties will leverage on the insecurities of individuals when it comes to realizing that there is bad happening. So I think I'm just going to deal with a few things. The first, how does information impact people? I think it's extremely important to note how majority of our arguments were left unresponded. Because the main crux and idea in Afif's and mine speech was about skepticism and how people view it to begin with. Because oftentimes it's easy for individuals to nitpick and blame certain races and religion. So in an example, we would argue that more likely individuals would be skeptic about certain race. For example, Muslims living in a certain area because they were more likely going to be tied to a certain terrorist group. All of this means that there will be unnecessary discrimination that is filled with hatred to begin with. Because realize that my argument specifically argued why there will be certain ammunition of hatred towards state when the opposition party leverages out of it. And this directly engages the sympathy thing that I think one of them argued. We would argue that sure, you get sympathy, but we would argue the means of that is not justified. Why is this the case? Because oftentimes when you want to get the sympathy of people, you need to realize that these are the same individuals and these are the same opposition parties that use the sympathy as their political tool to win the court of public opinion. That is to say, that it's easy for these opposition parties to use this as a leverage to win the hearts of the people to go out on riots. But why is it more likely they will go out on riots? Ladies and gentlemen, because it's a lot easier for you to pressure state at the point in which there's riots, at the point in which state is unable to control their citizens to begin with. But let's just deal with them, right? What happens in their world? Because they want to contend there will be less social instability. They wanted to say that there will be less riots. I would argue that it's actually the converse. Why is this the case? Because you would argue that they never really negated the fact that how opposition parties will still leverage off of this idea to begin with. That is to say, using sympathy as a tool. That is to say, using individuals that is dying as a tool. Ladies and gentlemen, the state isn't dumb. They will still prioritize public safety in places where there is suspected bombing of terrorism. Please gauge in a world in which the state is realistic. Ladies and gentlemen, exceptionally proud to propose.